A millionaire hires 3 women to pretend to be interested in his son, but he didn't expect it to spark a journey full of twists, love, and redemption. After hearing the story, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments with me. I'd love to know them. Enjoy! The afternoon sun filtered through the large windows of the Blackwood Mansion's library, casting elongated shadows over the mahogany bookshelves and leather sofas. Thomas Blackwood, a middle-aged man with graying hair and piercing eyes, paced restlessly through the room, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. He paused before a framed photograph above the fireplace. The image showed a smiling young man with dark hair and bright eyes, so different from the reclusive man his son William had become. "Sir," the butler's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Dr. Harrison has arrived." Thomas nodded, adjusting his tie. "Cinnamon Jenkins." Moments later, a middle-aged man with thin-rimmed glasses and a leather briefcase entered the library. "Mr. Blackwood, how are you?" "As well as can be expected, considering the circumstances," Thomas replied, gesturing for the doctor to sit. "And William?" Dr. Harrison sighed, settling into an armchair. "Unfortunately, there hasn't been any significant progress. William continues to resist any form of therapy or social interaction." Thomas clenched his fists, frustration evident in his voice. "It's been 5 years since the accident. 5 years of isolation, watching my son wither away in that wing of the mansion. I understand your concern, Mr. Blackwood," the doctor spoke softly. "But trauma and social anxiety don't have a fixed timeline for recovery. William needs time, and—" "Time?" Thomas interrupted, his voice rising. "He's had plenty of time. What my son needs is a push, something to force him out of this cocoon he's created." Dr. Harrison frowned. "Pushing William could be counterproductive. We need to respect his pace, and—" But Thomas was no longer listening. An idea was beginning to form in his mind, an audacious and possibly rash one. He turned to the window, gazing at the immaculate gardens of the estate. "What if," he began, more to himself than to the doctor, "what if we could create a controlled environment? A situation where William is gradually exposed to social interaction, without realizing he's being guided?" Dr. Harrison stood up, alarmed. "Mr. Blackwood, what are you suggesting?" Thomas turned, a determined gleam in his eyes. "I'm suggesting that if William won't go to the world, perhaps we can bring a bit of the world to him." "That sounds dangerously close to manipulation," the doctor cautioned. "As a professional, I cannot endorse such an approach." Thomas waved his hand, dismissing the concern. "I'm not asking for your endorsement, doctor. I'm informing you of a decision I've already made." The millionaire walked to his desk, picking up the phone. "Jenkins," he called, "contact my assistant. Tell her to start looking for suitable candidates." "Candidates?" Dr. Harrison echoed, puzzled. Thomas hung up the phone, an enigmatic smile on his lips. "Yes, doctor. If William can't find a reason to emerge from his isolation, perhaps it's time we provide that reason for him." The doctor picked up his briefcase, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwood, I urge you to reconsider. This approach could have devastating consequences for William's emotional well-being." But Thomas was already lost in his plans. He moved closer to William's photograph, touching the glass gently. "My son will return to the world, doctor, even if I have to rebuild that world around him piece by piece." As Dr. Harrison left the library, clearly perturbed, Thomas Blackwood remained there, gazing at his son's image. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the photograph, as if illuminating the path to an uncertain but full of possibilities future. Upstairs, unaware of the plans being laid, William Blackwood watched the same sunset through his bedroom window, feeling, as always, a prisoner not just of his home, but of his own mind. Thomas Blackwood's office, usually a sanctuary of tranquility, was bustling with activity that spring morning. His assistant, Margaret, a middle-aged woman with thin-framed glasses and a tight bun, meticulously arranged a stack of resumes on the mahogany desk. "Sir," she began, adjusting her glasses as requested, "I have selected the most promising candidates. They all have distinct profiles, but I believe each could offer a unique approach to young William's situation." Thomas nodded, his eyes quickly scanning the documents. "Excellent, Margaret. Schedule the interviews for this afternoon. I want to resolve this as quickly as possible." As Margaret left to make the necessary arrangements, Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection. It was a risky plan, he knew, but the image of his son wasting away in isolation compelled him to act. The following hours passed in a blur of faces and voices until Thomas found himself before the three finalists. Each represented a different piece of the puzzle he hoped to assemble. The first to enter was Olivia Reynolds, an aspiring actress with wavy blonde hair and piercing green eyes. She moved through the room with the grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted, her voice melodious and confident. "It is an honor to be here." Thomas gestured for her to sit. "Miss Reynolds, I understand you have experience in portraying complex roles." Olivia smiled, leaning slightly forward. "Absolutely. My theater background allows me to delve deep into various personalities. Adapting to unique situations is my specialty." Thomas observed her closely. There's a certain intensity in Olivia that could be useful, but also potentially problematic. And how would you approach a situation where you need to gain the trust of someone extremely reserved? Olivia's eyes sparkled with the challenge. "With patience and persistence, Mr. Blackwood. Every person is a stage, and my job is to discover which performance will captivate them." After Olivia, Sophia Chun entered, a young woman of Asian descent with thick-rimmed glasses and a posture exuding intellectual curiosity. "Sophia," Thomas began, "your resume mentions a specialization in social psychology. How would that apply to this unique situation?" Sophia adjusted her glasses, her tone analytical and precise. "Well, Mr. Blackwood, social psychology teaches us a lot about how people interact and form connections. In the case of someone with severe social anxiety, the approach must be gradual and non-threatening. My goal would be to create an environment where your son feels safe to lower his natural defenses." Thomas nodded, impressed by Sophia's clinical perspective. She offered a methodological approach that could prove valuable. Finally, Emma Foster entered. Unlike the other two, Emma seemed almost shy as she stepped into the office. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she carried with her a faint scent of flowers. "Miss Foster," Thomas greeted, noting her hesitation. "You seem a bit nervous." Emma smiled timidly. "Sorry, Mr. Blackwood. It's just that, well, this place is a bit intimidating for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Thomas asked, intrigued. "You know," Emma gestured vaguely, "someone who spends their days arranging flowers and talking to plants. I'm not used to." She glanced around the opulent office. All this. There was an authenticity in Emma that captured Thomas's attention. "And why do you think you would be suitable for this position, considering your unusual experience?" Emma hesitated for a moment, then spoke with surprising softness. "Mr. Blackwood, dealing with flowers has taught me that sometimes the most beautiful things need care and patience to bloom. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll be genuine in every interaction." As Emma left, Thomas leaned back in his chair, absorbing the impressions of the three very different women. Each offered something unique. Olivia's dramatic intensity, Sophia's analytical approach, and Emma's unpretentious authenticity. "Margaret," he called to his assistant, "inform all three candidates that they have been selected. Prepare the contracts and organize a meeting for tomorrow. Let's begin this experiment." As the sun set over the Blackwood estate, Thomas couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and apprehension. He was about to set in motion events that could change his son's life forever. He just hoped that, in the end, the outcome would be worth the risk. The day to put the plan into action had arrived. It took some coaxing, but William finally agreed to attend an event organized by his father. The ballroom of the Blackwood mansion, silent for so long, now buzzed with the energy of dozens of elegantly dressed guests. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd as waiters circulated with trays of champagne and canapes. At the center of all this activity, Thomas Blackwood watched the scene with a mix of anxiety and determination. His eyes continuously scanned the room, alternating between the three strategically positioned women and the main entrance, awaiting William's arrival. Olivia, stunning in a red dress that hugged her curves, had already seamlessly integrated into the environment, laughing and chatting with guests as if she'd known them for years. Sophia, in a sleek navy ensemble, observed the crowd with analytical eyes, clearly mapping the social dynamics of the event. Emma, on the other hand, seemed slightly out of place in her simple emerald green dress, staying close to a majestic floral arrangement she had created for the occasion. Sir Jenkins, the butler's voice, pulled Thomas from his thoughts. "Your son has arrived." Thomas took a deep breath, adjusting his tie. "Excellent, Jenkins. Ensure that our special guests are ready." The moment that followed unfolded in slow motion. William, pale and visibly uncomfortable in his black suit, entered the room. His eyes, wide and apprehensive, scanned the environment as if seeking an escape route. Thomas quickly approached his son, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "William, my boy, I'm glad you decided to join us." William gave a faint smile. "Father, I'm not sure if I can stay here. There are so many people and—" "Nonsense," Thomas gently interrupted. "It's just a small charity event. Come, let me introduce you to some guests." As he guided William through the ballroom, Thomas gave a discreet signal to Margaret, who immediately began orchestrating the movements of the three women. Olivia was the first to approach. With the grace of a consummate actress, she accidentally bumped into William, spilling a few drops of champagne on his coat. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her green eyes wide in a perfect performance of embarrassment. "How clumsy of me. Please, let me help." William, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden contact, took a step back. "No, it's fine." But Olivia was already dabbing his coat with a napkin, talking rapidly about how she was prone to accidents and how it always happened at the most inopportune times. Her lively chatter sharply contrasted with William's tense silence. Sensing his son's growing discomfort, Thomas intervened smoothly. "Ah, Miss Reynolds, don't worry. Accidents happen. William, why don't you step out onto the terrace for some air? The view of the garden at night is magnificent." Grateful for the escape, William quickly headed for the French doors leading to the terrace. Thomas exchanged a meaningful glance with Margaret, who discreetly instructed Sophia to make her move. On the terrace, William took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air ease his anxiety slightly. That's when he heard a calm voice beside him. The theory of gradual exposure suggests that situations like this can be beneficial for individuals with social anxiety, Sophia remarked casually, as if merely thinking out loud. William turned, surprised. "Sorry?" Sophia smiled, adjusting her glasses. "Oh, forgive me. I sometimes forget not everyone is familiar with psychological terminology. I'm Sophia Chun, a graduate student in psychology." "William," he replied hesitantly. "William Blackwood." "Ah, the host's son," Sophia nodded. "It must be interesting growing up in such a socially stimulating environment." William let out a humorless laugh. "Interesting isn't quite the word I'd use." Sophia tilted her head, her gaze analytical. "I understand. Social pressure in high-visibility environments can be quite intense. Have you ever considered mindfulness techniques to cope with?" But William was already moving away, mumbling an excuse. Sophia's clinical approach, though well-intentioned, had touched upon sensitive points he wasn't ready to discuss. Seeking refuge in a quieter corner of the ballroom, William found himself facing the majestic floral arrangement adorning one of the tables. Almost without realizing it, he reached out to gently touch one of the petals. "Beautiful, aren't they?" a soft voice commented. William turned, finding Emma standing a few steps away. Unlike the other two women, she made no move to approach, respecting his personal space. "They're lilies," Emma continued, her gaze alternating between William and the flowers. "They symbolize purity and renewal. I've always found it fascinating how something so delicate can be so resilient." There was something in Emma's quietness that demanded no response, allowing William to relax slightly. "Do you like flowers?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emma smiled softly. "They're my passion. Every flower has a story to tell, if we have the patience to listen." For a moment, they stood there, in comfortable silence, simply appreciating the beauty of the arrangement. William felt, for the first time that night, that he could breathe without the crushing weight of anxiety. From the other side of the ballroom, Thomas watched the interaction with growing interest. Olivia's and Sophia's approaches had clearly unsettled William, but with Emma, there was a spark of something different. As the night wore on, Thomas couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and apprehension. The plan was in motion, but its outcomes were unpredictable. In the weeks following the charity event, a subtle but noticeable change had come over Blackwood Mansion. William, still reclusive, was beginning to emerge from his shell more frequently, his appearances brief but significant. Thomas observed these changes with a mix of hope and caution, aware that the delicate balance he had created could collapse at any moment. The three women, each in their own way, continued their mission to get closer to William. To facilitate this, Thomas lied that they would be working at the mansion for a while. Olivia as his assistant, Sophia as an intern, and Emma as a gardener. One sunny afternoon, Olivia decided to take a more dramatic approach. She orchestrated an elaborate scene in the garden, pretending to twist her ankle near the spot where William often read. "Ow! Help!" she cried, her voice laden with theatrical anguish. Startled, William looked up from his book. For a moment, he hesitated, the instinct to retreat battling against the urgency of the cry for help. Olivia, sensing his hesitation, intensified her performance. "Please, I can't get up." Reluctantly, William approached. "Are you all right?" Olivia grasped his hand, her green eyes shining with carefully rehearsed tears. "Oh, William, what luck to find you here. I'm so clumsy." William, visibly uncomfortable with the sudden physical contact, tried gently to pull away. "Maybe we should call someone." "No," Olivia exclaimed, tightening her grip on his hand. "Please, stay with me. I'm so scared." The intensely emotional situation seemed to drain William. His eyes frantically searched for a way out, his body tense with the need to escape. At that moment, Emma appeared, carrying a pot of fresh flowers. Quickly assessing the scene, she approached calmly. "Olivia, is everything okay?" Emma asked softly, placing the pot on the ground. Olivia, momentarily thrown off by the interruption of her plan, hesitated. "I twisted my ankle." Emma nodded understandingly. "I see. William, would you mind holding these flowers for a moment? I'll help Olivia up." Grateful for the distraction, William took the pot, his gaze fixed on the delicate petals as if they were an anchor in the storm of his anxiety. Gently, Emma helped Olivia to her feet, suggesting that she lean her weight on her shoulder. "Let's get you inside to put some ice on it." As they moved away, Emma cast a reassuring glance at William. "Thank you for your help, William. You can leave the flowers there on the garden table if you like." After they had left, William remained in the garden longer than usual, his gaze alternating between the forgotten book and the flowers Emma had brought. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, Sophia was trying a different approach. She had noticed William's interest in books and decided to use this as an entry point. "William," she approached him one day as he was leaving the library. "Sorry to bother you, but I noticed you have a particular interest in classic literature. I'm conducting research on the therapeutic effects of reading, and I'd love to hear your perspectives." William hesitated, but the mention of books piqued his interest. "I don't know if I can help much." Sophia smiled encouragingly. "Any insight would be valuable. For example, do you think certain literary genres have a more calming effect than others?" For a moment, a spark of enthusiasm lit William's eyes. "Well, I've always found poetry to have an almost meditative effect." "Fascinating," Sophia exclaimed, her tone academic. "That aligns with some theories about mindfulness through literature. Have you tried mindful reading techniques?" William's enthusiasm began to wane under Sophia's clinical analysis. "I just like to read," he murmured, slowly retreating. Realizing she had pushed too hard, Sophia tried to backtrack. "Of course. Well, if you ever want to talk more about books, I'll be around." William nodded vaguely before withdrawing, leaving Sophia with the feeling that she had missed a valuable opportunity. As the days passed, it became increasingly clear that of the three women, It was Emma who managed the most natural and comfortable interactions with William. Her quiet, unintrusive presence seemed to soothe his anxiety, allowing moments of near normalcy. One morning, William found Emma in the conservatory, tending to the plants. He paused at the entrance, watching her work in silence. Emma, sensing his presence, smiled softly without turning. "Good morning, William. Would you like to help me water the orchids?" To both their surprise, William stepped into the conservatory. "I don't know how," he admitted softly. "That's okay," Emma replied, offering him a small watering can. "It's quite simple. You just need to be gentle and patient." As they worked side by side, a comfortable silence enveloped them. William, focused on his task, seemed more relaxed than he had ever been in someone else's presence. "You know," Emma commented gently after a while, "sometimes I think plants make better company than people. They don't judge, don't demand. They just need a bit of care to thrive." William looked at her, a silent understanding passing between them. "I get that," he murmured. Outside the conservatory, Thomas watched the scene with a mix of emotions. The plan was working, but not exactly as he had anticipated. Emma, the least likely candidate in his mind, was achieving what the others could not, slowly breaking down the walls William had built around himself. As the morning sun bathed the conservatory, illuminating William and Emma in their moment of quiet connection, Thomas couldn't help but feel that something significant was beginning to blossom, something as delicate and promising as the very orchids his son was learning to care for. Autumn had arrived at the Blackwood estate, painting the trees in shades of gold and red. The change in landscape seemed to reflect the subtle transformations occurring within the mansion and the hearts of its inhabitants. Emma was in the garden, gathering the last flowers of the season, when the reality of her situation hit her with full force. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked a chrysanthemum, the soft petals contrasting with the harshness of her conflicting thoughts. "What am I doing?" she murmured to herself, guilt weighing on her chest like lead. Over the past weeks, her interactions with William had become more frequent and meaningful. She saw the change in him, the shy smiles, the moments of genuine conversation, the way his eyes lit up when she entered a room. And, to her astonishment and concern, Emma realized her own feelings were changing. "Miss Foster?" Jenkins, the butler's voice, pulled her from her thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his office." Emma nodded, her stomach twisting with apprehension. As she walked toward the mansion, she couldn't help but wonder if Thomas had noticed something, if he knew that what had started as a professional arrangement was turning into something much more complicated. In the office, Thomas greeted her with a satisfied smile. "Ah, Emma, please have a seat." Emma settled into the chair, her hands restless in her lap. "I've been observing William's progress, and it's remarkable, truly. He's more communicative, more present. And much of that is thanks to you, Emma." The praise, instead of calming her, only intensified her internal conflict. "Sir, I appreciate your words, but," Thomas continued, seemingly oblivious to her discomfort, "I think it's time we step up our efforts. Maybe an outing beyond the estate? A dinner, perhaps?" Emma felt the blood drain from her face. The idea of deceiving William so blatantly was nauseating. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't think—" A knock on the door interrupted her. To the shock of both, it was William who entered the office. "Father, I wanted to ask if—" William stopped abruptly at the sight of Emma, his eyes widening in surprise before narrowing in confusion. "What's going on here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emma felt as though she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, about to fall. Thomas, recovering quickly, smiled. "William, what a pleasant surprise. Emma and I were just discussing the floral arrangements for her." "No," William interrupted, his voice trembling slightly. "You were talking about me. I heard my name." Emma stood, her heart pounding furiously. "William, I can explain." But William was already retreating, pain and betrayal evident in his eyes. "I thought you were different," he murmured before hastily leaving. Emma made to follow him, but Thomas stopped her with a gesture. "Let him go. He needs time to process." "Process what?" Emma erupted, tears threatening to fall. "A lie? A manipulation?" "Mr. Blackwood, This has to stop. I can't continue with this. Thomas regarded her, his expression hardening. Miss Foster, remember our agreement. The contract you signed. The contract didn't include hurting your son, Emma retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. I care about William. Truly. Thomas studied her for a long moment. I understand. And that's why you're perfect for this role, Emma. Your genuineness is what's helping William. Emma shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. It's not a role, Mr. Blackwood. Not anymore. With that, she left the office, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts and the weight of his decisions. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Olivia watched the unfolding scene with a mix of frustration and determination. She had witnessed William's abrupt departure from the office and saw an opportunity. Quickly, she intercepted William in the hallway. William, what happened? You look upset. William, still shaken, tried to pass by her. Not now, Olivia. Please. But Olivia wouldn't give up easily. With all the skill of a seasoned actress, she produced instant tears. William, I understand your pain. You know, I've been betrayed by someone I trusted too. Her performance, however, seemed to fall on deaf ears. William looked at her with a mixture of confusion and irritation. How would you understand? You don't even know what happened. The response caught her off guard. For a moment, Olivia's facade fell, revealing genuine frustration. I'm just trying to help, damn it. William recoiled, shocked by the sudden outburst. I need to be alone, he murmured, quickly moving away. Olivia remained behind, realizing too late that she had made a crucial mistake. Her ambition to win William had blinded her to the delicate nuances of his emotions. In the garden, Sophia observed the commotion with analytical eyes. She had noticed the changes in William in recent weeks and was fascinated by the progress, seeing it as a fascinating case study. When she saw Emma rushing out of the mansion, tears in her eyes, Sophia decided to approach. Emma, she called, her voice calm and professional. I noticed there was some sort of conflict. Would you like to discuss the psychological implications of this situation? Emma stopped, looking at Sophia with disbelief. Psychological implications? Sophia, this isn't an experiment. These are real lives, real feelings. The sharpness in Emma's voice took Sophia by surprise. For the first time, she found herself at a loss for words, confronted with the emotional reality of the situation she had treated so clinically. As the sun set over the Blackwood estate, each of those involved in this complex emotional game found themselves in a moment of deep reflection. William, locked in his room, struggled to understand the confusion of feelings that overwhelmed him, the pain of betrayal mixed with the longing for the connection he had begun to feel. Emma wandered the gardens, her heart torn between the genuine affection she had developed for William and the overwhelming guilt for her role in this charade. Olivia, in another room, rehearsed new approaches in front of the mirror, determined not to lose this competition, even though she was no longer sure what she was competing for or why. Sophia sat silently at her desk, her meticulous notes on the William case suddenly seeming cold and inadequate in the face of human emotional complexity. And Thomas, alone in his office, contemplated his son's portrait, questioning whether his well-intentioned intervention had caused more harm than good. Night fell over the Blackwood mansion, bringing with it a heavy quietude, laden with unresolved emotions and unspoken truths. What had started as a carefully orchestrated plan had turned into something much more complex and unpredictable, a tangled web of hearts and minds that no one knew quite how to untangle. The days following the incident in Thomas's office were tense and silent at Blackwood Mansion. The air seemed laden with unspoken secrets and repressed emotions, like storm clouds ready to burst. William, who had made remarkable progress in recent weeks, regressed to his old pattern of isolation. He spent hours locked in his room, emerging only for quick, silent meals, his eyes avoiding contact with everyone around him. Emma, meanwhile, wrestled with her conscience. Each time she crossed paths with William in the halls and saw him withdraw, her heart broke a little more. She knew she needed to tell the truth, but fear of the consequences paralyzed her. On a particularly melancholy afternoon, Emma found herself in the conservatory, distractedly tending to the plants. Her thoughts were so distant that she didn't notice William's approach until he spoke. "Why are you really here, Emma?" His voice, soft yet laden with pain, startled her. Emma turned, almost knocking over a pot of orchids. "William, I didn't hear you come in." William stood at the entrance, his posture tense. "You didn't answer my question." Emma felt the weight of the truth pressing on her chest. She set the watering can aside, her hands trembling slightly. "William, it's because of my father, isn't it?" He interrupted, his voice gaining a note of bitterness. "He hired you? For what? To fix me?" His words were like a punch to Emma's stomach. Tears began to form in her eyes. "It's not that simple, William. Please, let me explain." But William was already shaking his head, backing away. I really thought we had something special. That you were different. And I am," Emma exclaimed, stepping towards him. "William, what started as a job turned into something more. My feelings for you are real." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and irrevocable. William stared at her, his eyes a mix of shock, pain, and something else, a flicker of hope he struggled to suppress. "Feelings?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "How can I believe you now?" Before Emma could respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted the moment. Thomas entered the conservatory, his face a mask of calculated concern. "William, son, what's going on here?" William turned to his father, years of resentment and mistrust finally spilling over. "Why don't you tell me, Father, about your elaborate plan to cure me, about how you manipulated all of this?" Thomas paled, but quickly regained his composure. "William, you don't understand. Everything I did was for your own good." "My good?" William laughed without humor. "Hiring people to pretend to care about me? That's for my good?" Emma intervened, her voice trembling but determined. "It wasn't pretending, William. Not for me." Thomas shot a warning look at Emma, but she ignored it. Years of secrets and manipulation were about to come to light, and she could no longer keep the truth contained. "Your father hired the three of us," Emma continued, the words pouring out. "Olivia, Sophia, and I. We were hired to get close to you, to help you overcome your isolation." William staggered as if he'd been physically struck. "Three? Olivia and Sophia too?" At that moment, as if summoned by the mention of their names, Olivia and Sophia appeared at the entrance to the conservatory. Olivia seemed ready to step into the scene, her eyes glistening with rehearsed tears, while Sophia watched everything with barely disguised clinical interest. "William," Olivia began, her voice melodramatic, "we never meant to hurt you. Everything we did was out of love." William stepped back, looking from one to the other with growing horror. "Love? This isn't love. It's manipulation." Sophia, unable to contain her academic curiosity, interjected. "Actually, William, from a psychological standpoint, this situation presents a fascinating study on the effects of controlled social intervention in individuals with." "Enough." William's voice echoed throughout the conservatory, silencing everyone. He turned to his father, years of hurt and anger finally finding a voice. "How could you? I'm your son, not an experiment." Thomas stepped forward, his facade of control finally cracking. "William, you have to understand. I was desperate. Watching you isolate yourself, year after year, I just wanted my son back. So you decided to orchestrate this farce?" William retorted, his voice trembling with emotion. "To toy with my feelings, with my trust?" Emma, no longer able to contain her own emotions, interjected. "William, please. I know it started the wrong way, but what I feel for you is real." "No," William interrupted, raising a hand. "I can't deal with this right now. With any of you." With that, he hurried out of the conservatory, leaving behind a group of people in various states of shock and regret. Thomas made to follow his son, but Jenkins, who had silently witnessed the entire scene, stopped him with a respectful gesture. "Perhaps it's best to give him some space, sir." The ensuing silence was deafening. Olivia was the first to break it, her actress's mask finally falling away to reveal genuine dismay. "I think we went too far." Sophia, for the first time appearing truly affected, murmured, "The ethical implications of this are concerning, to say the least." Emma, tears streaming freely down her face, looked at Thomas. "What do we do now?" Thomas Blackwood, the powerful millionaire who believed he could control everything and everyone around him, suddenly looked old and defeated. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I really don't know." As the sun set over Blackwood Estate, casting long shadows across the conservatory, the group remained there, each lost in their own thoughts and regrets. The truth, so carefully hidden for so long, had finally come to light, leaving in its wake broken hearts and shattered trust. Upstairs, William locked himself in his room, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The trust he had so carefully begun to build had been brutally shaken, and he found himself once more alone, struggling to make sense of a world that seemed determined to hurt him. Dawn brought an oppressive stillness to Blackwood Mansion. The sky, painted in shades of gray and pale pink, seemed to reflect the melancholic mood of its inhabitants. The revelations of the previous day hung over everyone like a heavy cloud, laden with regrets and unspoken words. Emma had not slept. She spent the night wandering the gardens, her heart heavy with guilt and a desperate desire to fix what had been broken. As the first rays of sun began to touch the dewy flowers, she made a decision. With determined steps, Emma headed to William's room. She stopped before the massive oak door, her heart pounding furiously against her ribs. She raised her hand to knock, hesitated for a moment, then gathered all her courage. The ensuing silence was deafening. Emma was about to give up when she heard a soft movement from the other side. "William?" she called softly. "Please, I need to talk to you." More silence. Then, almost inaudibly, "Go away, Emma." But Emma couldn't leave. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. "William, I know I have no right to ask this, but please, give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain. After that, if you want me out of your life forever, I'll understand." The seconds dragged on, seeming like eternity. Then, slowly, the door opened. William stood there, his eyes red and swollen, hair disheveled. He looked so vulnerable, so hurt, that Emma's heart broke even more. "5 minutes," he said, his voice hoarse. Emma hesitantly entered the room. It was the first time she had been there, and the magnitude of the moment did not escape her. The curtains were closed, plunging the space into a twilight that reflected its occupant's mood. "William," Emma began, her voice trembling. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I know words can't undo what happened. I know I betrayed your trust, and that I might never completely restore it. But I need you to know the truth. The whole truth." William sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the floor. Emma continued, the words flowing like a river that had finally found its way to the sea. "When your father hired me, I was desperate. My flower shop was on the brink of bankruptcy, and I didn't know how I would pay for my mother's medical treatment. The money he offered seemed like the answer to all my prayers." She paused, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "But then I met you, William, and you were nothing like I expected. You were kind and sensitive and so incredibly special. With each passing day, I found myself falling more and more." Emma swallowed hard, summoning the courage for her final confession. "I fell in love with you, William. Truly. And that scared me more than anything else. Because I knew it had all started with a lie, and I didn't know how to fix it." William finally looked at her, his eyes a mix of pain and confusion. "How can I believe you now, Emma? How can I trust anything you say?" Emma knelt before him, her hands trembling with the desire to touch him, to comfort him, but she held back. "I don't expect you to believe me right away," she said softly. "I only ask for the chance to prove, with my actions, that my feelings are true. That what we could have, is real." William closed his eyes. "I wish I could believe that, Emma. More than anything." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unsaid emotions and uncertain possibilities. Then, almost imperceptibly, William reached out, his fingers lightly brushing against Emma's. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant to an outside observer. But to Emma and William, in that moment, it felt as though the entire world had shifted on its axis. "I don't know if I can forgive you," William whispered. "Oh, my father, or anyone involved in this. But maybe we can try to understand each other." Emma felt a wave of hope surge through her body. "That's all I ask, William. A chance." Meanwhile, in his office, Thomas Blackwood faced his own demons. He had spent the night turning over every decision, every choice that had led him to this point. The photo of his late wife watched him from his desk, her gentle eyes seeming to accuse him silently. "What have I done, Sarah?" he murmured to the photograph. "How did I lose my way so completely?" A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Jenkins. "Sir," the butler said, his voice laden with a mixture of respect and veiled disapproval. "Your son requested your presence in the conservatory." Thomas stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "William wants to see me?" "Yes, sir," Jenkins confirmed. "And if I may say, perhaps it's time for an honest conversation between father and son." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of years of secrets and manipulations on his shoulders. "You're right, Jenkins. More than right." As Thomas headed to the conservatory, Olivia and Sophia found themselves in the hallway, both looking displaced and uncertain. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, her usual confidence replaced by genuine vulnerability. Sophia, for the first time, seemed lost for words. "I don't know. I think we crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed." The two women exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Despite their different approaches and motivations, both now found themselves united in their regret and desire to make things right. In the conservatory, William awaited, his heart a confusing mix of hurt, anger, and a desperate desire for understanding. Emma stood by his side, a silent but comforting presence. When Thomas entered, the air seemed to become electrically charged. Father and son faced each other, years of misunderstandings and unmet expectations hanging between them. "William," Thomas began, his voice trembling, "I'm sorry. More than you can imagine." William nodded slowly. "I know, Dad, but I'm sorry isn't enough this time." "I know," Thomas replied, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix our relationship." As father and son began to unravel years of emotional complications, Emma watched silently. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with painful conversations and uncomfortable truths. But for the first time in a long time, there was also hope. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the conservatory in golden light. It was as if nature itself was offering a sign that, even after the darkest night, there is always the promise of a new dawn. And so, in that space filled with plants and light, wounded hearts began the long and delicate process of healing. It wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be quick, but with honesty, understanding, and above all, love, there might be a chance for a new beginning for everyone at Blackwood Mansion. The weeks following the revelation were a period of change and introspection at Blackwood Mansion. Autumn was advancing, and with it, the golden leaves were falling, as if nature itself was shedding the old to make way for the new. William, still shaken by the revelations, had retreated again. But this time, his isolation was different. It was no longer an escape from the world, but a necessary time to process and reflect on everything that had happened. On a particularly melancholy afternoon, William found himself in his favorite refuge, the old clock tower of the estate. From there, he could observe the entire expanse of the Blackwood Gardens, now painted in shades of red and gold. The constant ticking of the clock mechanism was an incessant reminder of the passage of time and the changes it brought. "How much longer will it take," he murmured to himself, "for me to trust again?" His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the wooden door. It was Jenkins, the butler, carrying a tray with tea and cookies. "I thought you might appreciate a snack," Jenkins said, his voice gentle and devoid of judgment. William nodded, grateful for the familiar and constant presence of the butler. "Jenkins," he began hesitantly, "did you know about my father's plan?" The old butler placed the tray on a nearby table and turned to William, his tired eyes full of compassion. "Yes, I knew." William felt a pang of betrayal, but before he could react, Jenkins continued, "And it was the greatest regret of my life, not standing against it. Sometimes, our desire to protect those we love leads us to make terrible mistakes." Jenkins's words hung in the air. William found himself reflecting not just on his father's actions, but on his own choices over the years. "I made mistakes too, didn't I?" William murmured, more to himself than to Jenkins. "Isolating myself, pushing everyone away." Jenkins stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on William's shoulder. "We all make mistakes. What's important is what we do after them." Meanwhile, in the mansion's gardens, Emma worked diligently, her hands busy with caring for the plants, but her mind full of thoughts about William. She had respected his request for space, but each day away from him was agony. "The dahlias are beautiful this year," a soft voice commented behind her. Emma turned, surprised to see Thomas Blackwood there. The man who once exuded power and confidence now seemed smaller, more vulnerable. "Mr. Blackwood," Emma greeted, uncertain. Thomas approached, his eyes fixed on the flowers. "You know, Emma, my late wife loved dahlias. She used to say they were flowers of renewal, of change." Emma nodded, unsure of how to respond. Thomas continued, "I've made many mistakes. With William, with you, with everyone involved in this situation. But looking at these flowers, I wonder, is it too late for a new beginning?" The question hung in the air, laden with hope and apprehension. Emma pondered for a moment before responding. "It's never too late to do the right thing, Mr. Blackwood. But new beginnings require honesty, trust, and above all, time." Thomas nodded, a small sad smile on his lips. "Time, something I always thought I could control by. But now I realize it is the most precious of resources." In another part of the estate, Olivia was asking herself, "What am I doing with my life?" She murmured to her reflection in the mirror. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Sophia. "So, you're leaving too?" Sophia commented. Olivia nodded. "I think it's time to face some truths about myself. Away from here." Sophia entered the room, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You know, as a psychologist, I always thought I had all the answers. But this experience showed me how much I still have to learn about the human heart." The two women, once rivals in a senseless competition, now found themselves united in their reflection and regret. "What will you do now?" Olivia asked. Sophia sighed. "I'll take some time to reevaluate my approach to psychology. Maybe write a paper on the ethical dangers of emotional manipulation, using our experience as an anonymous case study." Olivia laughed softly. "Always the academic. I think I'm going back to theater. But this time, I want to do roles that really mean something, that tell important stories." The two exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Despite their mistakes, both were determined to learn and grow from this experience. As the afternoon wore on, William descended from the clock tower, his steps slow but determined. He found his father in the office, bent over old family albums. "Dad," William called softly. Thomas looked up, surprise and hope mixed in his eyes. "William, I'm glad you came." William approached, his eyes falling on a photo of his mother. "I've been thinking a lot. About you, about me, about everything." Thomas closed the album, giving his full attention to his son. William continued, "What you did was wrong. It hurt not only me, but everyone involved. But I understand it came from a place of love, even if misguided." Thomas felt tears forming in his eyes. "William, let me finish, Dad." William gently interrupted. "I can't promise that things will go back to normal immediately. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But I'm willing to try. If you are." Thomas stood, fighting the urge to embrace his son. "I'm willing, William, to do whatever it takes." Father and son faced each other, years of misunderstandings and unmet expectations slowly beginning to dissipate. As the sun set over Blackwood Estate, Emma watched from the garden. Her heart longed for William, but she knew he needed this time with his father. "Are you all right?" a soft voice asked behind her. Emma turned to see Jenkins, the old butler, approaching. "I'm hopeful," Emma replied honestly. Jenkins smiled, his wise gaze fixed on the horizon. "You know, Miss Foster, in all my years in this house, I've learned one thing. After the fiercest storms come the most beautiful sunrises." Emma nodded, allowing herself, for the first time in weeks, to feel a true hope blossoming in her chest. Winter had arrived at the Blackwood Estate, covering the gardens with a white, silent blanket. Weeks had passed since the revelations that shook the foundations of the mansion, and a tense calm had settled among its inhabitants. William, though still reserved, began emerging more frequently from his room. His interactions with his father, Thomas, were cautious, but there was a visible effort from both sides to rebuild their relationship. Emma, respecting William's space, continued tending to the winter gardens, her heart heavy with longing and hope. She knew that trust, once broken, was difficult to repair, but she was determined to prove the authenticity of her feelings through her actions. On a particularly cold morning, William was in the library, idly flipping through a book of poetry. The soft crackling of the fire in the fireplace was the only sound in the room until soft footsteps alerted him to someone else's presence. "William?" Emma's voice was almost a whisper. He looked up, his heart involuntarily quickening at the sight of her. Emma stood at the entrance, holding a vase with a delicate arrangement of winter flowers. "I brought this for the library," she explained, hesitant. "I thought it might bring a bit of life to the place." William nodded silently, watching as she placed the vase on a nearby table. The gentle aroma of the flowers filled the air, bringing with it memories of the moments they had shared in the conservatory. "They're beautiful," he murmured, finally breaking the silence. Emma turned to him, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "William, I know I asked to wait, but can I talk to you? Really talk?" He hesitated for a moment, then closed the book and gestured for her to sit. Emma took a seat in the armchair opposite him, her hands nervously clasped in her lap. "I've spent the last few weeks reflecting on everything," she began, her voice trembling but determined. "On my actions, my choices, my feelings. And I've come to a conclusion." William watched her intently, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed a mix of apprehension and hope. Emma continued, "What started as a job, a financial necessity, turned into the most real and precious thing in my life. William, I fell in love with you. Not for the role I was supposed to play, but for the kind, intelligent, deeply sensitive man you are. I know I betrayed your trust, and I understand if you can never completely forgive me. But I want you to know that every moment we spent together, every conversation, every shared silence was genuine on my part." William was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, laden with emotion. "Emma, I've also spent a lot of time thinking about us, about everything that happened. And as much as I wanted to be angry, as much as I tried to deny it, the truth is I fell in love with you too." Emma's heart leapt, but she held herself back, waiting for William to continue. It was hard, incredibly hard, to accept that something that started in such a manipulated way could turn into something real. But then I remembered every moment we shared, how you were the only person who really saw me, who accepted me for who I am. William stood, walking to the window. The snowflakes fell gently outside, creating an almost magical scene. "What I feel for you, Emma, is stronger than the hurt, stronger than the fear. And I'm tired of letting fear dictate my life." He turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "If you're willing, I'd like to try. For real this time. No secrets, no manipulations. Just the two of us, learning to trust and love each other." Emma stood, tears of joy running down her cheeks. "William, that's all I ever wanted." Slowly, as if fearing to break the moment, they moved closer. William reached out, gently touching Emma's face. The touch was electric, charged with promises and possibilities. At that moment, the library door opened, and Thomas entered. He stopped abruptly, seeing the scene before him, a mix of surprise and hope on his face. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." He began to back away. "Wait, Dad," William called, surprising everyone, including himself. "Stay, please." Thomas hesitated, then fully entered the library. William, still holding Emma's hand, turned to his father. "Father, I know we have a lot to work out between us. Many years of misunderstandings and unmet expectations. But seeing how something beautiful can grow even from the most improbable circumstances," he gently squeezed Emma's hand, "makes me think that maybe it's not too late for us two." Thomas felt moved. The moment was fragile, filled with emotion and possibilities. Emma, sensing the importance of what was happening, made a move to step away to give father and son privacy. But William held her hand firmly. "Stay," he whispered. "You're part of this now, part of my life." The three stood there, in the library warmed by the fire from the fireplace, as the snow gently fell outside. It was a new beginning, not just for William and Emma, but for the entire Blackwood family. Jenkins, who had silently witnessed the scene from the door, smiled to himself before discreetly withdrawing. After years of tension and secrets, there was finally real hope for healing and reconciliation at Blackwood Mansion. As the afternoon progressed, William, Emma, and Thomas began to talk, truly talk, for the first time in years. There was much to be said, much to be forgiven, but the first step had been taken. And outside, as if nature itself was celebrating this moment of reconciliation, the snow began to lessen, and a timid ray of sun broke through the clouds, promising brighter days to come. "What is that?" William asked, curious. Thomas smiled, a gleam of emotion in his eyes. "Something I should have shared with you a long time ago, son." They sat on a nearby bench, and Thomas opened the box, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and small objects. "These were from your mother," he explained, his voice soft with the memory. "She always wanted you to have them when you were ready, and I think now is the right time." William took one of the letters with trembling hands. His mother's elegant handwriting brought tears to his eyes. "She wrote about you," William murmured, reading the lines. "About how she knew that no matter what happened, you would always love me and try to do your best for me." Thomas nodded, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "I made many mistakes, William. I tried to protect you from the world in a way that ended up pushing you away from it. But your mother, she always knew you'd find your way back." Emma watched the scene, her heart overflowing with love for William and respect for the man Thomas was becoming. She knew there was still a long road ahead, but seeing father and son share this moment of vulnerability and connection was deeply moving. As they leafed through the contents of the box together, reminiscing about past moments and creating new memories, Jenkins approached discreetly. "Forgive the interruption," he said, "but there's a visitor for Miss Foster at the entrance." Emma frowned, confused. She wasn't expecting anyone. With a questioning look at William and Thomas, she rose to accompany Jenkins. At the mansion's entrance, a middle-aged woman awaited, a nervous smile on her face. "Mother?" Emma exclaimed, surprised. Emma's mother stepped forward, embracing her daughter. "Oh, Emma, when I received your letter explaining everything, I needed to come see you with my own eyes." Emma returned the hug, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "But your treatment? Are you okay to travel?" Her mother stepped back slightly, smiling. "The treatment was a success, dear, and much of it is thanks to you and your sacrifice. Now, tell me everything about this young man who stole your heart." At that moment, William and Thomas approached, curious about the commotion. Emma made the introductions, her heart brimming with happiness at seeing her mother interacting with the Blackwood family. The afternoon went by in a whirlwind of shared stories, laughter, and occasionally emotional tears. Thomas insisted that Emma's mother stay at the mansion for as long as she wished, an offer that was accepted with gratitude. In the evening, as everyone gathered for dinner on the porch, watching the sunset over the gardens, William found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "You know," he said quietly to Emma, "for years I hid from the world, afraid of getting hurt, of being rejected. But now I realize that by doing so, I was depriving myself of moments like this." Emma intertwined her fingers with his. "Sometimes the greatest gifts in life come disguised as challenges. What's important is having the courage to face them." William nodded, looking around the table. His father, laughing at a story told by Emma's mother. Jenkins, serving dessert with a discreet smile. And Emma, the woman who had entered his life under false pretenses but ended up becoming his anchor, his lighthouse in the storm. "I think I finally understand what it means to truly live," William murmured, more to himself than to others. As the night continued, bringing with it a gentle breeze and the glow of the first stars, the Blackwood mansion seemed to vibrate with renewed energy. It was no longer a place of secrets and isolation, but a true home, full of love, forgiveness, and infinite possibilities. Thomas, watching his son and Emma share an intimate moment, felt a wave of gratitude. His plan, born out of desperation and misguided love, had taken an unexpected turn. But the outcome, although different from what he initially imagined, was infinitely more precious. As the moon rose in the sky, casting its silver light over the gardens, William pulled Emma to a more private corner of the porch. "Emma," he began, his voice trembling slightly with contained emotion, "when you came into my life, I was lost, isolated. But you show me there is beauty in the world that's worth taking risks and opening up." He paused, gathering courage. "I know our beginning was complicated, but each day with you shows me that what we have is real, precious, and eternal." Emma held her breath, her eyes shining with unshed tears. William continued, "I don't want to spend another day without knowing for sure that you'll be by my side. Emma Foster, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Tears now flowed freely down Emma's face. "William, yes, 1,000 times yes." As the couple embraced, sealing their commitment with a passionate kiss, the rest of the family watched discreetly from the porch, smiles of joy on their faces. The Blackwood mansion, once a symbol of isolation and secrets, now pulsed with life and love. The walls that had for so long imprisoned lonely hearts now echoed with laughter and promises of a bright future. Thus, under the starry spring sky, a new story began to be written. A story of redemption, second chances, and the transformative power of true love. William and Emma, together, were ready to face any challenge the future might bring, knowing they had each other and a newly united family by their side. Thomas Blackwood's original plan had failed magnificently, but in its place, something much more valuable had flourished. A true family, united not by obligation or manipulation, but by love, understanding, and mutual acceptance. As the night wore on and the stars shone brightly in the sky, the Blackwood mansion rested in peace, its inhabitants finally in harmony with themselves and each other. The future, once uncertain and feared, now opened before them, full of promises and infinite possibilities. If you enjoyed the story, don't miss the next ones appearing on your screen. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to us. See you next time.